In this lecture, I'd like to talk about the imperative mood. The tense of Greek verbs only has time significance when it's in the indicative mood, and that is the mood that we have been in for some time now. But now we are transitioning out of the indicative mood and into the imperative mood. And as we transition out of that mood of reality or in the indicative mood, we're going to begin to look at aspect a bit more, type of action in these moods. So a present imperative, a present tense in the imperative mood does not mean a present in time action. It means more about the type of action, so a continuous action. Whereas the aorist is more undefined action. And the perfect is still has a completed action that has effects in the present time, but again, it's more about the type of action than it is the timing as we move out of the indicative mood. The imperative mood is used to express command primarily, and it tends to appear in the present and aorist tenses in the Greek language. The perfect tense imperative is rare. And in Greek, in English, all imperatives are in the second person, but in Greek, you have second and third person forms of the imperative. It makes sense that you would not have a first person imperative because you just can't make a command with I, but you can do something. I can tell you to do something, or I can tell him or her to do something, the third person, but I can't tell the first person to do something. A command imperative is obviously what it sounds like. It expresses a command. And here's an example from Matthew 4:6. And he says to him, if you are the Son of God, cast yourself down. So here, bale is our imperative. Second person, you cast yourself down. There are three ways to express a command. The present imperative, which would be an ongoing action, an aorist imperative, which is undefined type of action, and the future indicative, which is actually not imperative. We're back in the indicative in that tense, but because it's future, it almost sounds like a command. So the imperatival future indicative, here's an example from Matthew 22:37. And he said to him, you will love the Lord your God. Okay, so let's pause there for a minute because this is actually a future indicative that has an imperatival force to it because if you listen to it, and he said to him, and here the NRSV has shown us that they have translated this, you shall love the Lord. So it's kind of like it can come across like it's what you ought to do. But if we really emphasize this as an imperative, then it moreover is more related to a command than a suggestion, and that seems to be quite distinct. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all of your soul, or your entire soul, and with your entire mind. In the Greek language, requests or entreaties often come in the imperative form. It doesn't mean that, and particularly in the Lord's Prayer, there are some imperatives used in that Lord's Prayer. It's not that we're commanding the Lord to act, it's that the imperative mood is just the typical mood for request or entreaty. So that's how we might describe that, an imperative of entreaty or request. It's expressing a request. So 2 Corinthians 5:20, quite a long sentence there, but on behalf of Christ, therefore, we are ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We entreat on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. Okay, be reconciled there is an aorist passive, second person plural imperative. So that's why we have the be reconciled. But it's you Be reconciled. You all, actually, you all be reconciled to God. So there's your imperative in form, and we can pull that up with BibleWorks, but it's an aorist passive imperative. Be reconciled. There's also an imperative form of the imperative, how it is, there's a prohibition. How is the negation happening in Greek? In the indicative mood, we typically saw "ou" as the negation, but as we move into the imperative, a word will be negated using the particle may, which prohibits the action. Here we have an example from Ephesians 5:18. Methuskasthai is a present passive imperative, second person plural. And here we have the may before it, the negation. So do not, present passive, remember, do not be, it's kind of hard to translate into English, right, when it's passive. But do not be drunk, or do not become drunk, or because it's actually the wine, the emphasis is on the wine acting upon the person, right? But do not be drunk or get drunk with wine. There's our dative with wine, or by means of wine, a dative of means. But the imperative here is negated with the not using may. Now, so that is an indicator. If again, if we were learning the Greek language not using BibleWorks, we would be memorizing these forms, and that may would become important because this verb could look very similar to an indicative verb otherwise. The last part of the sentence, but again, we have a passive imperative, but be filled in pneumati, by the Spirit, or with the Spirit, by means of the Spirit. But be, you all be filled. So again, it's plural. And there's an imperative with a prohibition in the first part of that sentence. Another example from Luke 1:13, kind of a long one. He said to, the angel said to him, so ha angelos is the subject of apon. The angel said, and then we have our postpositive day, but or and, which is going to come first in the sentence, even though it's second or third in Greek. But the angel said to him, do not phobou, fear, or be afraid. There's our imperative, Zechariah, because the prayer of you, your prayer was heard. Here's an aorist passive indicative verb. And the wife of you, your wife Elizabeth, will give birth to a son. Will birth or beget a son to you is the literal. So there's our soy dative personal pronoun. And you will call, here's our future indicative, but it's probably an imperative. Future has an imperatival force to it. You shall call, or you will call, or you are to call, if it's a command, right? You call his name John. In Matthew 4:17, we'll skip to the second part here. Metanoiete ingiken gar he basileia ton uranon. Metanoiete. Repent. You all repent. Now, we can't necessarily, even though this is a present imperative, we can't necessarily tell that it's continuous, right? Sometimes we have to bring that out in the translation, but you could possibly say, keep repenting, for the kingdom of heaven, ingiken, has come near, or is near. Remember, that's a perfect, so it can be, instead of has come near, it can have the present implications drawn out. But the metanoiete is a present imperative. But remember, we're focused more on the type of action than the timing of action, because we're out of the indicative mood. Repent, or keep repenting, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. Here's an example, and I wanted to pull up an example using BibleWorks of Matthew 4:17. Apotote erxato, ha Jesus kerusein, kai legain, metanoiete ingiken gar he basileia ton uranon. From then, or from that time, you see the NRS translated. From then, Jesus began. And here, exato is an aorist middle, third person singular. Jesus began kerusein, kailegein, two infinitives, which we will get to here shortly. Jesus began to preach or to proclaim and to say metanoiete, which is an imperative, present active imperative. If we were to put our mouse over that word metanoiete, we'd come up with this parsing for metanoieo, imperative, present active, second person plural. You all repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near, or is near. So just wanted to show you, remind you what it would look like if you were pulling up the verbs and what you would see as your parsing and how you would make sense of that.